we're going to finish Megachile today. And next week, and moving forward, we're taking, requests for what genus we start doing the species on next. But we also wanted to kind of have an open office hours for next session where can be a kind of, Mike will be back, at least I think so. Do an Ask Me Anything for Sam and Mike, and bring direct questions from characters or requests for things that you want pictures of, either species, characters, whatever. Yeah, Sam, do you want to say anything else about that?
No, we're good. We can roll with almost anything. So maybe we'll put out something more in email to let everyone know.
Great. Well,
bring out your mysteries.
Yes. Great. Well, let's get started.
So we have the last group, and these are all things that have no front coxal spine to speak of, just a low mound, sometimes not even that. And I'm just going to share right now, and we're going to go back and revisit a little bit we had started into that group, Campanulae and Exilus, and we had the mysterious, hang on for 1 second, let's share. The mysterious hair. Well, I can't even remember the name of the hair. Mike took it out of the current guide because we found that both Exilus and Campanulae both had this hair. I'm going to show you a picture here in a second. Very different and strange, and probably is a good character for those two, but does not separate those two. Other characters do. So let's return to that. I'm going to take you to the camera. And remember, we tried to find it last time, but it had been tucked under and you couldn't see it. But here we have Campanulae. So Campanulae, dark front tarsal segments, narrow and long, if you wanted to calculate it that way, front tarsal segment, particularly the basotarsus here. Comparatively, it's not the greatest angle on that. And this is this strange hair. Now, does anyone remember the name of it? I can't remember it now, but I have never seen this before. And we did some poking around with some of the other groups, and we think it's unique to these two species, but it's just really strange. Just one. What is it?
Mastigophorus.
Yes, the Mastigophorus. And so there it is. Really cool in some ways and mysterious at the same time. Additionally, in this picture, we can also make out by changing the focus another feature that separates out, and this is why these were sometimes considered, because there's a bunch of these odd characteristics sometimes have been in the past considered a separate genus from Megachile. So here's the mandible. We're looking upside down, and here's the mandible. And in most species, there's a basal tooth, and it's basal. So there's a big projection, quite spectacular and large. We've seen some of this before, but it's down near the mandible base. And but in Exilus and Campanulae, it's basically in the middle. So here it is right here. It's rather huge, but it's in the center rather than at the base. The point is over the center rather than near the base of the mandible. There's probably a couple other things, but those I wanted to point out. So we'll leave now because we talked quite a bit about Campanulae and Exilus, but if we have questions, we can go back and revisit them. They have, when I'm looking, I'm mostly looking at the front basotarsi and tarsal segment combo there to see whether it's a little bit longer, but all dark and not very cupped on the backside. This is the front side in Campanulae here. And then in Exilus, these are wider. These are about wider than the tarsal segment here. And you can see these are narrower than the tarsal segment. Mike talks about it in a slightly different way, but it's the same idea and more compressed. And particularly when you look from the rear side, it's has pale elements. It's not completely yellow for sure. It's more of an amber brown, but much paler than you see in campanulae. Then there's a couple other features in terms of hair length and other things that can be seen. I find Mike's front coxal hairs a little bit difficult to discern unless you have both and can look at both of them. They're quite different when you have them in comparison, but they both have a lot of hair there. One is denser and shorter, and the other is longer and a little floofier, but hard to kind of quantify when you're looking at only one, but certainly adds an element to the identification when you have nice comparative series. So in order to get through today, we can return to these. I'm going to now go back to Mike's guide, and might refer to Discover Life also in this because we have slightly different ways of talking about this next group here. So if I just, in terms of Exilus, the other nice feature, if we have time, we can go back to it, is the basetarsal hairs are quite different, and they have a nice measure. You can compare them to the width of the basotarsus, and in one, they're about the width, and the other, they're quite a bit wider than the width of the basotarsus, and that's pretty easy to see. So this last group here includes inermis, which we're going to take a look at here first because it's different from these last three. These last three will be a set of relatively common specimens, particularly relativa and montivaga seem to be very regular, relativa being the most common, often in urban areas. Centuncularis is a northern species that's introduced. It's very similar to these other two, a bit more northern, very much more associated with cities, but different, tricky to separate out. And inermis is another northern species, but it's huge. So I'm going to pull the inermis specimen that I have here on deck and get rid of our campanulae friend and put that in. So just by measurement with a ruler, it's going to be so much larger than the others. I see Mike is using T6 surface sculpturing and such things, but the size is going to be the key variable. I don't see him giving a size here, but I think we do in the Discover Life features. And he has the tubercles, so these are the little bumps on the forecoxy are obscure or absent versus forming little triangular mounds in montivaga. Those are hard to see, particularly in curled up specimens, and you have to get the angle right. But when we're looking here on the screen, oops, if I can get to the one here, I'll take this back down, take this in, and oops, it's back here. The specimen is large and it's got a very long vertex. So unusual is the length of this vertex back to the back of the head compared to the distance between the two ocelli. Bring this up a little bit. It also has a distinct amber color to it compared to the very much more black and white of montivaga and the other species. Let's go back to what Mike talks about here. And when he's looking at this, he's talking about the T6 surface. We're going to look at that in montivaga too, but we'll take a check here. And this is something, the T6 surface above the flange, which is not the true rim, but above the flange, is an area that in all of these, we're going to want to take a look and see what's going on. So here, when you get to inermis, so in separating montivaga from inermis, is in addition to the long vertex, is this obscurely pitted rather than distinctly pitted area on T6. And he has front basal tarsal hairs longer, variable in length but those would be trickier to see. Let's take a look at T6 of this monster. And you can see this will be quite different. We're going to show montivaga next. You can see here, here's the flange, the true rim, as in many of these male Megachile, lies below here. And you see, and I'm going to run up the magnification, that it's really difficult to discern anything more than a few widely spaced vague pits here and there, and that's going to be quite a bit different. However, size alone should be indicative of that species inermis than all the other ones in that group. So I'm going to pull up montivaga. It's half the size, at least, of this one, and put its. Let's take a look at its vertex here. Take off these tags and see how it compares in terms of length of that vertex. Should be a lot shorter. In fact, let me just run it up a little bit so it's easier to see what we're looking at here, in addition to the much smaller size, is if you look at this distance here, it's actually greater than the distance from the back of the ocelli. Get that in focus. Back of the ocelli to the edge of the head, the vertex, they would be called. So that's one measure that discriminates all of these from inermis. But now montivaga is often confused with the other two that we're going to show next. Relativa and centuncularis are non-native species. So I'm going to tilt this even more. Oftentimes in this group, the tip of the abdomen really gets curled under. And separating this from many of the other ones we were just looking at last time is the fact that this is T6 here is completely bare. So here's the rim of T5, hairband on that, as all of them pretty much should have. Now, if you recall what we were looking at in inermis, this is quite different. So this is heavily pitted, almost contiguous or contiguous, so the pits are immediately adjacent to one another. Far, far different from inermis, but size and that vertex character really differentiate that. This montivaga is trickier now to differentiate from the relativa and centuncularis specimen. And so the key here is when we're looking back here is the fact that this pitting is detailed. I can see every single one of the pits, and when I compare it to T5, which we're going to bend a little bit so you get a better shot, those pits are roughly the same size. So the T5 pits and the T6 pits are about the same size, and additionally, they're very distinct. They're not murky. It's not difficult to tell them apart. In centuncularis in particular, it can be so, shall we say. Bring this back down. Get the specimen in there. There we go. So we're going to look now at T5, which is this last one that's visible. So in other specimens that don't curl under so much, the last segment would be T6, but this is actually T5 here. The lighting, which I might try and change a wee bit, is dark. Let's see if I can bring in the lights a little bit closer here. And not something that, because we're not looking at side to side and we're not changing it back and forth. But the point here is that these pits are about the same size as the pits in terms of diameter, size, and shape as on T6 below for this species. Additionally, on the face, which in this specimen I believe is not visible, we're going to look. We have a lot of hair, like almost all Megachile have lots of hair on the face. And what we want to try and investigate, and sometimes you might take a pin and scrape this off, is what's going on in the center of the rim. In relativa, you'll see quite a stout, I don't know if it never has that, but quite a stout projecting knob coming out of there. In montivaga, there can be some bumps in the area, but it's not going to be the same size and shape. We'll see this in the relativa specimen, and I'd have to shave this off. And often that's a thing you can do, is you can take a pin, rub that off. I'm not going to do it here. And you'll see much less architecture than in relativa. Comparatively, montivaga is yet again larger than relativa, and about the same, I'd say, as centuncularis. But it is, bring this back on, it is bigger. So this in a much more subtle way than between this species and inermis. It averages larger, and relativa is quite a small bee, often about the size. It's probably the closest of the native Megachile to our friend rotundata, consina, and whatever the last one is that I can't remember that we're invading from Europe. So first thing I'm going to do is take this relativa specimen, and I'm going to show you if I can, it should be visible. I checked it out before. It's usually peeking out because the hair is just a little bit less, and the central stout spine is usually more prominent. It's usual dark specimen problem, but this is the central knob that's coming out of the clipial rim of relativa. I'm going to show you a different specimen because I've got a couple more handy. So look at that, because that knob is a good distinction for the specimen. So goes down, and here's the knob peeking out again right there. I'm going to change the angle so that perhaps it will be highlighted a tiny bit more. In this angle, a little bit. So there's the center of the mandibles, there's the center of the clypeus, there's the knob coming out. Again, a little bit of pin work to move those hairs away would reveal that more. Similar to montivaga, if we go and take a look at the T6 and T5, comparing the two, we'll see very distinct pitting. So the pits are discernible, unlike in inermis and a bit more in montivaga. So here we can see T5 pretty well already there. Relativa, though, the pitting on T5 averages larger than on T6. Do I have that right? I'm going to switch to Discover Life here and double check my wording on this. So here's the Discover Life guide. We have a set of characters for those three. They're relativa, small. We'll talk about the claws in a second, but because that's really a centuncularis character. Thank you, Corey, for that one. Clypeus rim when viewed end on with a small stout knob. Okay, we looked at that. and can have smaller knobs on either side, you definitely would have to move the hairs out of the way. T6 is shiny and covered in medium-sized pits, moderately dense and similar in size and density to those on T5. So I think I misspoke that on montivaga, let's just look, the pits on T6 are smaller, and you can tell it's pretty, it's a subtle difference. So on T6, they're covered in tiny, closely packed pits on T6, much smaller than those on T5. So theoretically, montivaga, the difference is smaller on T6 and not on T7. In relativa, it is that they are the same. But you can see that I was already confused between the two. So theoretically, we should see this. That's why the knob is so much nicer to work with, that these pits should be about the size, as I spin this specimen, of T6. And it's a dirty specimen, a little bit difficult to say. That's why it's a tricky group, because it's subtle. So the combination is small, clear pits, there's clearly pitting there. It should, in theory, be about the same size as on T5, and a stout knob and a more southern distribution too would equal relativa. Although at the moment, I'm not sure what Montevaga's distribution is to the south. We can look that up if we have time. I'm trying to get through at least a visual on all of these. I think we'll do that. So now we'll go to, oh yeah, we're making good time. So let me just check. How much, Claire, how much time do we have left? I can't see a clock on this.
Yeah, you have plenty of time. It's
Okay.
only 1:23.
Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. So maybe it's because Mike and I tend to talk so much. But now when we go to centuncularis, let's see what Mike says about centuncularis. So he's dividing them between relativa and centuncularis in this case. So he's looking, so here, relativa, margin, anterior margin or rim of the clypeus has that median tubercle, that little bump. And in centuncularis, without any small tubercles. So that's a really good way of discerning the two. And he's discerning the montivaga all the way up here, where he says T6 surface obscurely punctate, and I would disagree. Montivaga does have clear pits, but I think relativa does too. So as we just saw. So let's take a look. T6 preapical carina entire without a weak notch or concavity. Okay, so we can look for a notch and or margination in the flange or the preapical carina on the rim. So we're pulling out, and then we'll bring in this other character that Corey Sheffield likes and is visible, but again, another slightly tricky one that he talks about with centuncularis, which is that the outer claw and which is has a two teeth. The longer tooth on the hind leg is rounded over and blunt and not pointed, and in comparison to the inner tooth and across the other teeth in other species too. So we'll return to that, but right now we want to look at what Mike is talking about here, which is that the preapical rim, so that secondary flange on T6 is entire and doesn't have the usual notch or margination chunked out of it. So we'll go to the microscope, get this in here. It also tends to be a species specimen that is on the yellowish end of the spectrum. And often dark hairs, although neither Mike and I use that in the male guide, but in the female guide, the presence of long dark hairs in the region of T6 is used in the ID, or T5, I guess there. So we'll go back here, take down the magnification, and we're going to take a look at the abdomen. As is usually the case, it's curved over. And so it's hard to see here. And this is my only specimen. I believe I might have to turn this a little bit. I believe this is the rim of T5, and this is the carina that we're trying to see of T6. I may have to bend this again here. And it's not got any central notch to it. It's entire and it's slightly convex. Whereas we'll switch back to relativa and there should be a emargination or notch out of the middle of that. I'm going to change this a little bit in terms of the angle, see if that's helps us see the, yeah, oh, that's better. Okay. So you can see some black hairs in here too, which is possibly unique, but we haven't done the comparison. But you can see what we're looking at, rim of T5, here's T6. This is that apical flange, underneath is the true rim, which we totally can't see now. And this rim of this flange, which under many species, most species, would have a central emargination or cutout, if you will, and the center does not. Mike's wording makes me think that perhaps there is exceptions to that, but I'm going to bring back relativa, and then we're going to go. Well, actually not. Let's look at the hind leg characteristics. So what we're looking for here is so this is basically, it says it's small according to the literature, but I find that centuncularis is averages a little bit bigger than relativa. So we're looking at the hind leg and we're looking at the claws, and we're going to compare the ends of the tips of those claws. And I've got a specimen that I think will behave such that we can see these things. Let's get this in focus. We're going to get our correct shot. All right, I want to angle. We're going to be, this should be the hind leg, and there's the claws, but it's at a slight angle. What we're looking for is that longer tooth of the two-part claw being rounded or blunted over. But let me change the angle on this so that we can see it in lateral view. Look, that's the lateral view. Okay, so theoretically, that would be good, but I'm going to move it again and see if we can get that appropriately set up. Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm looking at the hind leg for middle hind. There it is. Again, did I get the not quite. Let me try one more time. I'm going to tilt it all the way over. It is a small part of the bee. So for middle back, and there I'm putting the X on there. That should be our shot that we want to see. And what we're looking for is a slightly blunter tip. And I'm going to change the lighting on here so that we can see it a bit better. So just want to make sure I'm looking at, I don't use that character very much, but so let's make sure I get this right. The outer and longer tooth of the claws of the hind leg much more rounded over and blunt on the tip than the inner tooth of the claw. Okay, that's what we're looking for. Should be there. Need more light. Let's get some more light here. We'll go up to 400. Okay, that is good. Ooh, still. All right, we want to tilt it even further over. So there's basically the tip and of the front one, and there's the hind, the shorter one. I need to bring it more towards me, I think. It's so much simpler when you have it in your hands. Now, of course, the light is completely blown out. Is that the hind leg that we are looking at here? I don't know if this works on the others. Let's pretend that's the hind leg. And theoretically, this tip should be blunter than that tip. It doesn't quite look so maybe we don't have the hind leg involved. Go back all the way down. And I think I'm going to, it's still a tricky character, so I think I can't get it in satisfactory view. This must be the hind leg here, going over to there. I want to stop rather than waste everyone's time here. I'm trying to find it. Either that or I am just making matters worse when I try to find the tip of the claw. Right, I'm just gonna take the light back down so I can see something. And then I may give up. Because it looks like, again, I keep turning it the wrong direction to see the tarsal segments. That's possibly what we were looking at there. Oh, there it is. Okay, so let's get that centered. Let's bump up the magnification, and I'm going to change the lighting, and we'll see if we like this character or not. I have to admit that I've struggled with it. Okay, so theoretically, the outer one is blunter than the inner one. It doesn't seem, my notion, not particularly. So I think it's better to go with characters and the lack of the knob on that for centuncularis. Almost always, I've never seen them away from the inner city. Mike may have, though. Has anyone else had experience with that particular one? So we can go back. We have a little bit of time, I think. We can go back and review some of these others. We can go back to campanulae. I have them pull campanulae and exilis specimens, or are there other questions about this last resin-using group of males.
You are all welcome to unmute.
All right, well, I will say, okay, I'm just going to go back and we'll look at the campanulae exilis characters again from last week and review that. I've got a specimen. We'll look at some of the hair pattern things that Mike has included in his guide. So I'm going to take out, take out the centuncularis specimen and put it away. Does not get lost. Pulling exilis, go to Mike's guide. And so exilis, we have basically a shorter, wider, paler front set of tarsal segments. The forecoxa hairs are short and dense, mostly oppressed. But when we compare the two, you'll see that in comparison, it's easy. In isolation, it is not so much. And then in the hind basotarsal hairs are quite nice, quite a bit longer than the width of the basotarsus. So let's find our specimen. See, we're at 100. That's pretty good. All right, what are we looking at here? Okay, good. So I'm going to jack this up. This is a nice shot. First of all, you see that these tubercles are very short. They're still a little, they're prominent, but they're not spine-like like in the other species. So here's the front coxa, and you can see this is quite a lot and quite dense hair. But when you see the other one, you'll see that it also has quite a bit of hair too. But in comparison, if I recall right, exilis, which this one is got a denser and more oppressed or laying down hairs than the other one. So we're also looking at the obliquely, at least the front coxal segments. I'm going to turn this so you can see these better, but you can a bit see that the front coxae here are more concave on the underside. So if we were to look on the back, which would be in this region, you'll see that this is much more hollowed out. And there's paleness to these coxal segments that are not present in the campanulae. So let me change the angle here. See if we can get that in place. Get down. Get a good angle on the coxae. I seem to have turned it such that everything is hidden. Let's try it the opposite direction. You see it a little bit better. I didn't change it that much here. But if we're looking at the front coxal segments, you can get a better feel for the fact that it's not completely dark, but nor is it bright yellow or anything like that. So we're looking at the hind side here of the front coxae, and you can see the paleness and how hollow it is. I want to show you the front side so you can get a notion of the, which I think I'm going to do from the side, notion of how it is shorter. The front basal tarsal segment is shorter. And then we'll also take a look at the long hairs on the hind basotarsus. find the specimen. Well, I'm just not doing great on my angles here. I have optimally hidden the things. Wait, do I have another specimen? I do. I'm going to switch specimens for Xylus and go to the hind basal tarsal hairs and then to the front coccyx again. All right, let's jump this in here. So for middle hind legs, and here's the tarsal segment, tarsal segments here. This is the base of tarsi, and what we're looking at is the fact that it has quite long hairs. We'll get a campanula specimen out that are far wider than the width of the hind basotarsus. So you can see all the hairs coming off there pretty easily. Now let's see if we can get a better shot of the front coxal. Oh, we might be in luck here. So yeah, what we're looking at are the front tarsal segments. Here's the front basotarsi. Here's a tarsus, or the tarsus, and you can see here from this side. So we were looking at the underside the other time, which is quite curved under. That this is wider than the front tarsus, and you can see, even though there's a lot of white hair, you can see the paleness coming through in places. But again, it's not dramatically paler. But really, when you turn it over, you'll see that it's not. Neither is it all dark. So this distance here to here is a lot shorter, and I might be at a slight angle here, but Mike puts it as 2 times broad as long. I find the comparison between the width here and the width there to be more revealing. In the other specimen of campanulae, the distance was about the same, or even less between the two. All right, so let's switch to campanulae and see if we see these characters there, making sure I don't mix these up. So we'll go to the tarsal segments here. I believe we've nailed it. So when we look here at the hind basotarsus, I'm going to change the angle a little bit so it's more at right angles to our view. You can see that the hairs are not nearly as long as the one in Xylus, and that the distance here is about the same, maybe even slightly less than the width across of the entire basotarsus. Another character to look at. Now, if we go, luckily, to the front coccyx and area, let's see if we can get a peek inside there. I'm going to turn it upside down and see if we can see some of these differences in the hair pattern on the front coccyx, so the most basal segment of the legs. The legs are folded over and there's some tongue action going on here, but I believe we can kind of see some of what's going on. You also get the point that really it's a good comparative thing. So this is the front coccyx right here. There's the, residual spine or tubercle, and the hairs are still cover the entire surface. They're simply longer and a bit shaggier and not as dense as in Exilus. And this is a good shot here, though, of the front tarsal segments and basotarsus. And what you're seeing, first of all, it's all dark. This is skinnier. The front first basotarsal segment is longer, not by huge amounts, though. And that's why I have found it useful. Let's see if I can shift this a bit to think about it in terms of in comparison to the tarsus. So the width here in the front basotarsi is less than the width, or about the same, depends on the angle, of the front tarsus. So I think that's what I got. Any questions? Bring them up next week if you want. Your tricky specimens. Also, if you want, if you have the ability to take pictures, you can take a series of pictures of your, what is this, or am I looking at the right thing? And that would be helpful to Mike and myself. If you actually have a system that will project onto your computer, it means probably we can also see that when we share the screen with you, if that's possible. Is that possible, Claire? Can someone who's not? Yeah, okay.
I mean, well, we could do it. I mean, if you are, like, I see David's on. David, if you want to, like, connect, I don't know if your camera connects or anything. But just like Link did, if you have a microscope and a camera. But even if you just have PowerPoint or something up, I can make you a presenter and we can do screen sharing, or I think probably any participant, actually, I can give them authority to do that. So we could do, kind of a bring it to the class workshopping style.
Bring it to the class. And then we have to figure out what our next group is going to be.
Right. So thoughts? Do we want to stay within just do the Megachile Day, or move on to something that people are working on a series of that they could benefit? We've gone through, as a reminder, species wise, we've gone through quite a bit, actually. The greens, Halictus, Calides, Savastra, Eucera, Melisodes, Hylaeus, Hoplites, Osmia, Megachile.
We still have some really other, like, monster groups: Lazyglossom, Andrina, Calides.
Claire's put in the chat.
It seems like several more years of work, but that's okay. They're here. I think it's useful for a lot of people, and ourselves too. Mike and I discover, like, oh, that's a good character. Maybe we should get rid of that.
And I was just talking to Rob. He wants to have some Andrina stuff out by the beginning of the year, so maybe he'll be willing to bring that to class and workshop it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I should mention that Rob, Jean, David, as whom I assume
some people are on here.
Yeah, and David Bittinger and Margarita from Penn State are have a chunk of money now to work on guide development, and David Kappert has, if I always hesitate on your last name, David, but I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Perfect.
Good. Are also working on ID things, and we hope, as is Mike and myself, so we hope to, continuously upgrade features. Now we have been, and off to the side, working with Karen Wright on Melisodes, and I believe David Bittinger's group is going to tackle the uploading of all that, which will be big because it'll be all the species, but only females. Mike's got a good male guide though for the Midwest. So, you know, what another 30, 40 years and we'll be in good shape.
That's what.
And we always invite you guys to send us questions and identify problems. And if you are interested in your area that may not be covered right now, we can work with you to create whatever species group you want to tackle using just the existing literature, and possibly also by scoring them too. But you know, there's a literature out there for almost all these species, and the identification keys can be reverse engineered and put into Discover Life pretty easily. So we're doing that with Mike's as we speak. In the past, we just got all the specimens in one place and scored each of them for the characters that were group characters. But now we're realizing like we can't really do that for every single species, and then using some of the existing keys and then catching up later is a good strategy. And then of course there's Mexico, which would be lovely to have guides expanded to the south.
I think we have a couple Texans in our group here, at the very least.
Yeah, so West Texas, even big chunks of East and Central Texas need to have a bunch of species added to the guides.
Oh, well, there's nothing going on in the chat.
Okay.
We have a call for Andrina and another suggestion to just stick with the Megachile. So bring it to class next week. Bring your pictures, your questions, and we'll see you then.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Claire.
Bye.